But so there's some things you need to know about his particular style of reporting. Can you call it reporting? I think it's mostly just fear mongering, but I guess we could call it reporting. I'm not sure. Anyway, a lot of times he'll ask a question instead of saying something outright. And the reason he asks a question instead of saying something outright is because if he says it outright, then he's declaring it as a fact and he's liable for what he says. But when he asks it in the form of a question, no matter how implicating the question may be and how obvious his implied answer is to his own questions, legally, he's allowed to ask questions. And, yes, so we're going to listen. We're not going to look at his stupid face because I'm not going to give you all that disservice. But we're going to listen to just 12 minutes. And we're going to see how long it takes to get through these 12 minutes of Tucker Carlson. I've given, yes, we did change the down polish. We're red now. But I've given him the nickname Master BS Spinner. Because he spins BS is what he does. He doesn't spin the truth. He spins BS. It's kind of amazing. He's a master of his craft. I don't know which orifice of his body excretes more feces, his mouth or his anus. I think we need a scientific investigation. We need a medical journal documentary to get to the bottom of this. Anyway, so we're gonna take this as painlessly as possible, and I am putting up a disclaimer right now. There will be pain. There will be pain, but we're gonna try to make it as little pain as possible. Well, here's the thing: is Tucker Carlson, unlike Bill O'Reilly, actually had some contextual social knowledge. Like he got his facts wrong a lot of the time, but he at least had some contextual social knowledge. Tucker Carlson has no time for social cultural knowledge. He just goes straight to the fear mongering. You know, Bill O'Reilly occasionally would do like patriotic pieces or, you know, maybe midway, like, you know, mid-level argument kind of stuff. But no, Tucker Carlson just straight to the fear mongering. And as long as he can be simultaneously smug and angry, I think is when he feels most comfortable. So any moment he can indulge in the satisfaction of being both smug and angry, he goes for it. So here we go. This is gonna be a trip. I hope you're all right. All right. Hopefully it's not too loud. We're gonna stop it every time something goes wrong. So even though it's a 12-minute clip, this could take several hours. Okay. Here we go.
Sick, you know that intensive care is not something that doctors recommend lightly. Boris Johnson is clearly in danger tonight, and that's a bad sign. Johnson is in his mid-50s and hale enough to lead a country.
Oh. I thought we were gonna get a little further than that. Honestly, I swore I was gonna get a lot further than that before I had to hit the pause button. Oh, but okay. Already so much to unpack. Okay. Oh, let's get. Oh, all right. Keep it together. We can do this. Okay. Hale enough to lead a country. Who the fuck says hale enough to lead a country? Let's just get that out of the way. Okay. What does being hale enough to run a country have anything to do with resistance to a pandemic virus? What is it? Does being elected give you superhuman biological powers where you can just will yourself against infection of a and gives us all something to worry about because he's in his 50s and hale enough to run a country. Not being in your 50s makes you like patient zero for the coronavirus. That's the kind of the whole thing, is that the older you are, the more out of whack your immune system is, and the more the virus can wreak havoc on you. That's kind of the whole point of the thing. But I guess apparently up until now, we haven't needed to worry because no one like Boris Johnson was getting COVID-19, right? Up until now, it was just, you know, replaceable, disposable people. But now Boris Johnson, Trump of the Britain, is in critical condition. So now we have to be very, very, very diligent because now it's real. Now it's going to be a problem. All right, here we go.
If this can happen to him, a lot of us should be worried. And
that's the bar. That's the bar we're starting off. Okay. You should all model. We should all model our immuno well-being off of Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is the plumb line to which all immunosuppressed symptoms should be measured. He is the quintessential example of a healthy human being. He's certainly not overweight, certainly not consisting of bad diet practices, certainly not in a stressful environment 24/7. He is a bastion, a shining beacon on the hill of health, a veritable Hercules, our own very own Arnold Schwarzenegger of politics. This man could not be healthier than Boris Johnson. He is the pinnacle. The pinnacle. Oh my God. All right. Anyway, okay, we gotta keep going. We still got another 12 minutes and 15 seconds to go.
we are worried enough to endure things that just a month ago would have seemed preposterous. Last week, Dr.
Okay. Everything we're doing right now, we were talking about doing a month ago. Some of the things we're doing now, we were doing a month ago. None of this is preposterous. This is exactly what we wanted to do 3 months ago. This was the plan last year. There is no difference in perspective from last month to this month. It has gotten more serious, but we have known the entire time. This is nothing new. But please continue. I don't want to stop you, Carl. Please.
Michael Ryan, he's a leader at the World Health Organization, announced that in response to the spread of this virus, authorities may have to enter people's homes and remove family members, presumably by force.
True. How could Tucker Carlson possibly spin this in a negative light?
In most parts of the world, due to lockdown, most of the transmission that's actually happening in many countries now is happening in the household, at family level. In some senses, transmission has been taken off the streets and pushed back into family units. Now we need to go and look in families to find those people who may be sick and remove them and isolate them in a safe and dignified manner.
Just so you know, we're coming to your house, seizing your children, and, quote, isolating them in a safe and dignified manner.
Okay. I don't think he ever once said the word children. In fact, children are probably the one group of people who do not need to be removed because they're either going to be strong enough to resist the virus and show no effects whatsoever, or otherwise have a speedy recovery. So, not sure why we had to go straight to children, but sure, fear-mongering 101, they're coming for your kids. So, all right, we're on the bandwagon. Let's jump down this rabbit hole.
Whatever that means. Now, that's not something that under normal circumstances officials casually drop during briefings. It's the kind of statement that might trigger violence. People don't respond well when you threaten to take their kids. But Ryan said
I don't know where he's going with that point. People may respond to. Is he saying that the possibility of needing to remove family members from homes is going to incite violence, and therefore people who respond violently are the fault of the WHO? I don't even know why you would bring that up. But okay, carry on. Continue.
Like it was no big deal, and that's how the media treated it. His threat didn't make headlines in any of the major newspapers.
His threat. Did you hear that? His threat. Not his World Health Organization pandemic response guidelines. His threat. But carry on. No, keep putting words like threat and children into his mouth that never came out. Go on.
In this country. That's the kind of moment we're in. So how long will this moment last? Well, on Friday...
Also, by the way, in case you're wondering what this whole take your kids is going to be, here's the thing. It's not the American middle upper class white people family health organization. It is the World Health Organization. And the reason it's the World Health Organization is because they are responsible for keeping tabs on the global population's health. Now, unlike the fucking mansion in suburban white America that fucking Tucker Carlson popped out of in his greasy slime ball egg out of his mother's cloaca, a lot of people live in slums. A lot of people live in poor countries. A lot of people live in a house, nay, even just a room of their 12 closest family members. So in places like India or rural China, you do have these stay-at-home orders, which are causing families of 12 and more to be crammed into tiny little houses for weeks, if not months on end. And there are infirmed and there are immunocompromised in these families. And because they're poor, they can't afford to put them anywhere else. And they would need an international rescue team to come in and provide care and housing for these people who are at risk, because they literally cannot afford to not be where they are in the conditions they are in. It's actually a very necessary and good idea for some parts of the country. Is this going to happen in America? No. We have laws and rights in this country, and it's clearly not going to happen. But in some countries, they actually need it and would welcome it as a relief because they can't afford to do any better under the circumstances. But anyway, I digress. I know, I keep bringing in facts. I'm sorry. I keep mentioning facts and statistics, and I'm sorry. I apologize. Back to the fear-mongering. I don't want to get off topic.
The mayor of Los Angeles predicted that the first in a series of lockdowns will go on until June.
One of the things that just concerns me, it's not one of those immediate concerns, but is, this draws out through the summer, and then the cold weather comes around, and then there's another wave of it. How do you, as a leader, how do you think about this?
Early on, when people said, is this just going to be a few days or a couple weeks, I said, no, I think it's at least 2 months. And I said, if we're successful in this, we can expect a second spike in the late fall or early winter. That's how viruses work. We better steel ourselves for a second and maybe even third round of this. But we also need to be nimble enough to know we're not going to flip a switch one day and turn the economy back on.
A quote, second and maybe even third round of lockdowns. That's a long time. Okay. Former Obama official Jason...
I just want to listen to his little side comment again. Hold on.
A quote, second and maybe even third round of lockdowns. That's a long time.
That's a long time? No, that's a number of times. If I said I had to go to the store 4 times last month, you wouldn't say, wow, you went to the store for a long time. No, I went to the store 4 times. It's not... It's not a duration. It's a frequency. But carry on. You're doing real good. You're doing real good, Meg. We're almost 2.5 minutes in, guys. We're making good time.
Former Obama official Jason Furman, who's now an economist at Harvard, predicts the disruption may be even more severe than that. Quote, we should certainly be prepared for a meaningful level of deliberate suspension of economic activity for the rest of the year. Well, it would be nice to know that there's a good reason for all of this, and of course everyone wants there to be a good reason, sincerely.
Yeah.
Yet the arguments for a prolonged national lockdown are starting to sound strained. In a much-discussed article on Medium recently, 2 academics from Pittsburgh argued that lifting the lockdown at all, even many months from now, would be negligent. Quote, as long as a large majority of the population remains uninfected, lifting containment measures will lead to an epidemic almost as large as would happen without having mitigations in place at all.
Yep. That's true.
Well, that sounds plausible when you read it. In fact, it sounds like science. But
well.
is it science? A large majority of the population remains...
That sounds plausible. You know, that almost sounds like science. That almost sounds like a objective, critical, factually based analysis for the current situation. I must dismiss this immediately.
uninfected, they say. But is that true? We don't know it's true.
That's true. We don't know what percentage of the population is infected. You know why we don't know what percentage of the population is infected? Because some people who were in charge of this whole thing for the last 4 months have done nothing to accelerate the accessibility and implication or application of testing of the majority of the population. When Germany was getting ready, they tested 1 million people in like the first month or a couple weeks. And because they had that huge percentage of their population data right out of the get-go, they knew exactly where they needed to focus all their efforts, exactly what they were going to expect in the future, and were able to successfully plan out the whole thing. But here we are 4 months into it, and we still don't know. I wonder who's responsible for that problem. Okay, carry on.
Today, nobody can say what percentage of the American population is infected or has been infected. There haven't been large-scale randomized tests conducted here.
That's right.
We don't even know when the disease first...
That's right. And why? And why, Tucker? Why? Why haven't large-scale tests been conducted? Are we going to get into that? Wouldn't a reporter's duty discussing the horrific state of lack of testing in this country, wouldn't it be a reporter's duty to immediately get to the bottom of this, find out why in the face of a potentially millions killing pandemic have we not gotten our testing up and running? Why?
Arrived in the United States. There's informed speculation that this strain of coronavirus has been here since late November or December.
Yep.
Authorities traced the first confirmed case to January 15th in Washington state. An unnamed 35-year-old Chinese immigrant landed in the United States.
Wow. You see how I slid that one in there? A unnamed Chinese immigrant. We're just gonna while we're getting the fear mongering going, let's just throw a little Chinese immigrant under the bus for this whole. It's the whole pandemic started in America because of one unnamed Chinese immigrant in Washington. Not to say that it is neither Washington nor any state touching Washington that is currently dealing with the biggest fallout of this pandemic. It's California, which is several states south of Washington, and New York, which is on the entire other side of the fucking continent, and Florida, which is almost as far from Washington as you can get in the United States. But again, that fucking Chinese immigrant in Washington started it all. Anyway, let's keep it going.
United States after visiting his family in Wuhan and wound up in a hospital outside Seattle. Apparently he recovered. Now, depending on how you count, the virus has been circulating among us for up to 4 months now.
Yep.
We are being censored.
Hold on, we have to pause for another fear-mongering commercial in the middle of our fear-mongering. Please hold. Okay.
For most of that time, there was no systematic attempt to quarantine the population. How many...
Again, as a reporter, if there was no systematic attempt to quarantine the population after confirmed viruses of a potential pandemic, wouldn't your job as a reporter be to investigate why? Like, why wasn't anything done for the first 4 months for containment of this potentially pandemic virus? Wouldn't that seem like something a reporter would investigate? I don't know. Anyway, I'm sure he'll get to it. I'm sure he'll get to it. Let's continue.
Many Americans were infected over that period. Again, we don't even have a ballpark number for that.
That's right.
But the number could be enormous because the virus turns out to be much easier to transmit than we thought it was. On Friday, you may have...
Much easier to transmit than we thought it was. No, we always knew it was easy to transmit. It's a fucking virus. If there's one thing that's easy to transmit, it's a virus. The only ones who may have thought it wasn't easily transmitted were people who knew nothing. Oh, but continue on. I'm sure this is going to get better.
The CDC issued new guidance on mask use. The government now recommends wearing, quote, cloth face coverings in public. Why'd they make that change? Because researchers are learning more about how this virus moves from person to person.
Yes. You see how he's talking about facts, but he's talking them in this weird, like, condescending tone? It's like, yeah, and these scientists are changing what they're saying as they learn new information. I mean, who does that? Who actually takes the time to research something and then changes their opinion based upon the findings of the research? You gotta be an idiot to do something like that.
Scientists now believe the coronavirus can be transmitted by someone who shows no symptoms merely by speaking. Remember when they told you that hand washing was the key to staying safe? That recommendation was based...
Yes, and it still is. And you're still supposed to wash your hands. That hasn't changed. But continue. It's getting good. It's getting good.
It's on the belief the virus lived mostly on surfaces, and that's not the case.
It is the case. So here's quick biology lesson. There are 3 ways that a virus can spread. The first way a virus can spread is through the air. Airborne viruses are the most dangerous because an airborne virus has particular defense mechanisms biologically that allow it to endure difficult environments. So an environment with no water, an environment with minimal oxygen, an environment that's cold, an environment that's hot. It's very easy to survive it, and it can just drift through the air, surviving until it hits another target and affects that person. The second kind of virus is a fluid transmitted virus, which is what the COVID-19 falls into the category of. A virus like that needs to be having a consistent level of fluid, right? Because something like COVID-19 has a very complex fat structure around it, so it can mimic the fat structure of cells so that it can get into the cell to infect it. And that fat structure will decompose if it gets too dry, gets too hot, gets too disrupted by being bumped around, things like that. And so it needs a certain amount of moisture to maintain its structure. Otherwise, it will degrade. And soap, for instance, will dissolve that fat layer. And then the third is a tissue transmitted disease, which is usually like your blood diseases or things that are living in muscle tissue that you can get from eating animal meat or from eggs or things like that. So there are different kinds of viruses. And now we already knew COVID-19 was a fluid transmitted virus, which means any surface that maintains moisture from your snot or your spit or whatever will be able to sustain the virus. Now, the question when you have a liquid transmitted virus is whether or not it can survive certain levels of moisture. So how large or small of a drop of water does it require to maintain its structure? How long before or how long after the moisture is gone can the virus maintain itself? Think like there's a whole smear of survivability of a virus in and out of water and what those conditions need to be. So you can know that a virus is transmitted through fluids, but you may not know to what extent. So when you hear things like they were testing whether or not COVID-19 could be aerosolized, the reason that's important is because when you're speaking, you're aerosolizing your spit. And if the aerosolized droplets of spit can sustain COVID-19, then that means that you can transmit it by speaking and aerosolizing your spit onto someone else. We know as a base fact that all liquid transmitted diseases can be transmitted mostly on your hands because your hands are naturally already moist. They have a fat layer on them already. They're touching everything. They're constantly getting exposed to other moisture sources. And so your hands are numero uno in the realm of transmitting fluid devices. So washing your hands, yes. And then as we learn how much more the virus can survive in other conditions, we can learn other precautions that need to be taken. The reason they said don't wear masks initially is because if they did, everyone would have bought masks and our healthcare workers would not have had access to the masks they needed. And now that we've got everything somewhat situated as to who needs what where, we're going to all sort out. Jordan, hello. Came to tomorrow and started getting educated. I apologize, but we're breaking things down as we can. I got to get some things off my chest. It's been building up all day. Can't have it. Anywho. So yes, as we learn more, we will change our recommendations. And there's a lot of factors that go in it. But continue.
We're still not exactly sure how the virus is spread, but among some populations, and this is interesting to know, it appears to be astonishingly widespread. An article in the Italian media last Thursday, for example, described a blood drive in a village in Lombardy. That's in the northern part, the most infected part of the country. Of the 60 people who showed up to give blood, 40 tested positive for coronavirus. None had shown symptoms of it. None knew they had it.
So his basis of argument is a sample size of 60 and a result of 2/3. That's that almost sounds like science.
Keep in mind that Lombardy has been strictly locked down by government order since March 9th. That's almost a month ago. Yet about 70% of this group got it anyway. A report from Hong Kong in February suggested that a woman diagnosed with the coronavirus may have infected others 10 floors away in the same apartment building, even though she never came into contact with any of them.
Probably because they were recirculating the air. Carry on.
Health officials concluded the virus likely traveled through plumbing pipes to different apartments.
Or plumbing pipes.
And it wasn't
There
a
you go.
wild guess. In 2003, an outbreak of SARS spread the same way.
Sounds right to me.
So it's starting to look like the coronavirus is more transmissible than we expected.
Starting to look more transmissible than we expected. Okay, maybe more than you expected, but we knew. We knew. We knew. Carry on.
Or were told. The good news is it also seems far less lethal overall. Virus. Authorities may have to enter, but among some populations, have infected others 10 floors away in the same apartment building.
Sorry.
Even though
I got
she
so
never
excited
came
I
into
clicked the wrong
contact with
spot.
any of them. Health officials concluded the virus likely traveled through plumbing pipes to different apartments. And it wasn't a wild guess. In 2003, an outbreak of SARS spread the same
45
way.
seconds on the clock. Get your mouth with it.
So it's starting to look like the coronavirus is more transmissible than we expected
Okay,
or
now
were
we're back.
told. The good news is it also seems far less lethal overall.
Okay. Seems far less lethal overall. Seems far less lethal overall. Less lethal than what? Than you expected again? I believe the initial reports for lethality were anywhere between 1 and 3%, maybe even as high as 5%. And that's what we're seeing right now is 1 to 3%, maybe even 5%. That I don't think that has changed at all. But carry on.
People are still dying in large numbers. Not all of them are sick or old, and that's terrifying to watch. But as the data trickle in, there's evidence that many infected people are not sick. Iceland has tested a larger percentage of its population than any country in the world. They've tested about 5% of all citizens. The United States, by comparison, has tested 0.3%. So far, about half those who've tested positive in Iceland have been completely asymptomatic.
Howdy.
So given all of this, what is a wise response to this pandemic? Historically, health officials have used quarantines to contain infectious diseases. Until now, a quarantine consisted of separating the sick from the general.
I'm going to give him a pass here. I don't think to contain the disease is the right terminology, but Yeah, well, okay. Well, I'll give him the pass on this one, and we'll see where he's going with it, and then we'll have to dissect it a lot further in just a little bit. Let me get across this bridge before we resume the fear mongering. Can only take this very. Yeah, this is. Go Teach. You keep talking about facts though, but those are facts. Go Teach. We can't fearmonger if we're talking facts. We need to speculate.
Population, and then doing everything possible to protect the especially vulnerable.
Yep.
In this case, that would include the elderly and the immunosuppressed, among other groups.
Yes.
We have a pretty good idea that targeted quarantines work.
Yes.
They've been used for centuries around the world.
Yes.
But that's not what we did.
No.
Instead, the United States and many other countries instituted mass quarantines.
Yes.
In which governments shut down entire nations for long periods.
Yes.
That's never happened before. Now, mass quarantine.
It's never happened before. Didn't China do that like 5 times in the last decade? Never happened before? Okay, anyway, carry on.
Makes sense if you're fairly certain it will prevent mass infection. But are we certain of that?
Makes sense if it will prevent mass infection. No. The idea of a quarantine is not to prevent mass infection. It is to slow down the spread so you have time to get all of your logistical preparations in order and to reduce the number of cases all happening at the same time, so that it's a much easier thing to manage. It's called flattening the curve. It's not designed to prevent it. It's not designed to eliminate it. It's designed to slow it down and spread it out so that it's more manageable. But carry on.
Well, despite what you might hear on television, we are not certain of that still. In fact, there are some indications.
I love that line. Despite what you may hear on television. I feel like I'm back in Polkaville, Pennsylvania. Oh my God. Despite what you might hear on television. He's saying this on television. What is going on? Okay. All right. And thank you, G Soldier, for the raid. Much appreciated. Sorry, I have to get this off my chest. This guy has been under my skin all day today, and I just need to let out all my steam. So you all have to bear with the ranting.
It hasn't been as effective as we'd hoped it would be. Italy imposed one of the
hasn't been effective as we hoped it would be. There are states reporting drops in their curve ahead of schedule. It's actually working better than we hoped it would in places, even like New York. New York has actually seen an ahead of schedule drop in the curve, which is amazing. But again, sorry, I don't want to let my facts get in the way of your fear mongering. Please continue.
The toughest lockdowns in Europe. Almost a month later, as we just told you, an overwhelming majority of at least one town has been infected with the virus anyway. Now, it's possible to imagine that a mass quarantine might stop transmission of a virus. It might work if it
It's, again, the point is to not stop transmission. It's to slow it down. Slow it down. There's a big difference between trying to stop it and trying to slow it down. The reason they're not trying to stop it is because they know they can't stop it, but they can slow it down. That's the whole point. But continue. I keep getting.
From an epidemiological standpoint, this is lunacy.
What?
If you wanted to infect an entire population, you'd encourage everyone in a specific zip code to meet regularly in one enclosed location. It doesn't make sense.
Wait a minute. Go back.
It hasn't been as effective as we'd hoped it would be.
Okay, now we're back.
Italy imposed one of the toughest lockdowns in Europe. Almost a month later, as we just told you, an overwhelming majority of at least one town has been infected with the virus anyway.
Okay.
Now, it's possible to imagine that a mass quarantine might stop transmission of a virus. It might work if it actually separated people, if citizens were forced to stay in their homes and not have any interaction with other people. But we're not doing that in the United States. We never will do that here. Too many Americans live alone
We aren't doing it here. Okay, if we did this, it would work. But we're not doing it, and we're not gonna fucking do it. Like, what? What? My house is on fire. It wouldn't be on fire if I allowed someone to dump thousands of gallons of water on it, but I am not gonna let someone dump thousands of gallons of water on my house. And so my house is burning and I am outraged. If only someone could do something. Oh my god. It's like poetry. It's like a verbal version of Timothy Dexter's A Pickle for the Knowing Ones. It's like if you turned that style of writing into a style of lectern. Like it's actually amazing. That's right, G Soldier, have a good one. Thank you for the raid again. Much appreciated. All right. Let's keep it going.
one thing. People would starve to death. Instead,
welcome in, everyone. Sorry I'm not catching up with chat. I just got to get this off my chest.
To buy food.
I'm sorry.
The one place you can go is the supermarket, where, by the way, everyone else in your neighborhood has been this week.
Yeah, because food is, I don't know if you know this, but food's essential. And there's not the infrastructure in this country to deliver food to every house in America all at the same time. So yeah, people do need to eat. You are correct. You are correct. Eating is essential. Yes. Yes. Yes, Tucker. Yes. We do have to continue eating. We can't not eat for the next 4 months. You are correct. Yes.
From an epidemiological standpoint, this is lunacy. If you wanted to infect an entire population, you'd encourage everyone in a specific zip code to meet regularly in one enclosed location.
But they're not all going at the same time. They're going like once a week for half an hour at the most. And while they're there, they're keeping their distance from everyone else and keeping the total volume of the store to an appropriate level. It's not like everyone's having a big, circle jerk fest in the middle of ShopRite every day for 4 hours, right? It's like it's spread out. But continue.
It doesn't make sense. Authorities must know it doesn't make sense, that's obvious, but instead of changing course or fine-tuning, they're doubling down, hoping that vehemence will compensate for bad science.
What?
Here's the mayor of Los Angeles just last week.
What?
If you've observed recurring violations of the Safer at Home order, please continue to let us know at coronavirus.lacity.org/business violation. You know the old expression about snitches? Well, in this case, snitches get rewards. We want to thank you for turning folks in and making sure we are all safe.
So you just saw the mayor of our second biggest city offering to pay citizens to snitch on their neighbors for, among other things, daring to go to work.
Yeah.
Working is one activity we've decided should not be allowed. Jogging, fishing, golf, fine. Being employed, a massive threat to public health.
Yeah. Yeah. Am I missing something here? In order to jog, you need yourself and a bunch of open space. In order to work, you need a bunch of people and an enclosed space. One of these two things is great during a pandemic. The other of these two things, as you so eloquently put not moments ago, would be the perfect conditions into which you could spread a virus by having everyone in the same space at the same time in an enclosed environment. It's almost like he predicted his argument and then defeated his own argument before he even said it. It's astonishing. It's astonishing. But anyway, continue.
We've decided that offices are somehow more dangerous than supermarkets, far more dangerous.
Yes, because again, you spend maybe half an hour at a supermarket and you can distance yourselves. Whereas at a job, you're spending 8 hours and you're all close together. Big difference. But continue.
Dangerous, though no one has to date bothered to explain how. The result of this? By some estimates, more than 17 million Americans are unemployed right now. That's the highest number in the history of this country.
Is that right? Like, weren't there more than 17 million during the Great Depression? Now I gotta... That literally took me 3 seconds to look up. That literally took 3 seconds to look up. You want to say that again, Tucker? Say that one more time. Hold on.
Americans are unemployed right now. That's the highest number in the history of this.
Oh, highest number.
It's far more dangerous.
Highest
though no
number.
one has
Hold
today
on.
bothered to explain how. The result of this? By some estimates, more than 17 million Americans are...
Okay, so 17 million is the highest number is what he's saying. It has no regard to population percentage. Just the highest number. Right? Do I have numbers? I have percentages. What was the U.S. population in 1930 or 1940? 14% of the nation's population in 1930. 14%. 14% of 12 million? That seems like a high number. Oops. Sorry. 123 times 0.14. 17 million. During the Great Depression, 17 million U.S. citizens were unemployed. So say that again?
Explain how. The result of this? By some estimates, more than 17 million Americans are unemployed right now. That's the highest number in the history of this country. A year from now...
So it's tied for the highest number, and that's just an estimate. That's not the actual number. That's an estimate. But okay, continue.
We should think about this. How will all of us feel about the decisions we've made in the face of this pandemic? Is there a single person who sincerely expects the coronavirus itself will hurt more people in the end than the damage we're causing in our response to it?
Well, I'm going to say 17 million unemployed, 2 million dead. I'm going to say the 2 million dead's a little heavier than the 17 million unemployed. But continue.
Probably not. Mass unemployment is almost certain to cause far more harm, including physical harm, to the average family than this disease. In 1967, two psychiatric researchers decided to rank traumatic life events in order of how profoundly they affected people's health. Stress can kill you, we know that, and they wanted to determine which kinds of stress were the most dangerous. The doctors found that losing a job ranked high on the list of health-degrading traumas. Joblessness came in well above death of a close friend, to put it into some perspective. If you ever found yourself unemployed with dependents to take care of, you understand this. Unfortunately, many of our policymakers don't understand. They've never been in that position. They never will be.
You've never been in that position either, so shut the fuck up.
Interest in middle-class job loss or its consequences. We know that because they've essentially ignored it for decades, not to mention the family disintegration and the drug epidemics it has spawned.
Okay, so we just derailed real fast there. We've gone from unemployment to death of loved ones, drug abuse epidemics, and suicide rates. Let me just put it this way though. I'm pretty sure the number of stress-related deaths is not going to be 2 million. I'm gonna say stress-related death, COVID-19 death. I'm gonna say one of those is gonna have a much bigger number by the end of this than the other. Just a guess. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an epidemiologist. I can't verify these things. But I'm gonna say stress-induced death and COVID-19 death. I think this one's gonna be a little bigger. Just a little.
So far, about 10,000 Americans have died from the Wuhan coronavirus. That number will rise, and it will likely include people you know. That's a tragedy. But it's not the only tragedy in progress in this country. In 2018, more than 67,000 Americans died of drug overdoses.
Okay. Weird time to bring that up, Tucker. You know, 500,000 Americans die from heart disease every year, but your network continues to sell products that contain high fructose corn syrup. Just saying. Just saying. Anyway, here's the difference. Something like mental illness, suicide, drug addiction, etc., etc., etc. Those things, they have treatment centers, they have prevention plans, and there is no overall cure. Something like COVID-19 has no treatment center, has no prevention, and can be ultimately cured. Which is to say, it is entirely different from any of those things. It shares nothing in common with any of the things you just mentioned. It is an entirely different animal requiring an entirely different approach. But continue. I don't want to let facts get in the way here.
The year before, more than 70,000 died. That's more than the entire population of the towns most of us grew up in. And those totals are far lower than the real number, according to people who study the question. The drug epidemic has permanently changed the demographics of this country, but for some reason, CNN has not kept a running tally of drug casualties on the screen.
Because it's
why
always
is that?
happening.
Well, you know why. It's not their peer group. It doesn't seem real. They're not that interested. And the same thing is going on now. If the
I'm going to wager an argument that liberal media outlets have probably talked about drug addiction infinitely more than Fox News. I can't verify that. That's not an actual statistic. But I would bet money that liberal media outlets have covered drug addiction hundreds of times more than Fox News has. But carry on.
Virus shutdown was crushing college administrators or nonprofit executives or green energy lobbyists, it would have ended last week.
Okay. Oh, boy. Oh, okay. Oh, boy. All right. One, this is not a problem that if you just throw more money and effort at goes away. This is something that runs its course regardless of whatever plans you may have. All you can do is mitigate and accommodate for what unfolds. But in the end, it's going to run its course and you just have to fucking live with that. It's not like if other people were doing something about it, it would just be over. It doesn't matter how good you are about it. It's eventually going to run its course, and there's nothing going to change that other than how we endure that time. Anyway, I'm losing hope at this point. As getting rougher and rougher to listen to this. So to think that college administrators, renewable energy advocates, and nonprofit organizations are not affected by this. Colleges were the first major institutions to actually do anything about the epidemic. They ended classes. They promoted online teaching outlets. They sent everyone home. They closed their public spaces. They were the first people to actually do something about it, and they're probably hurting more than anyone else. And like nonprofit organizations, they're not even doing anything right now, except for the ones that are actually in charge of emergency response. There are food nonprofit organizations that are feeding the millions of people that you just said were unemployed. There are nonprofit organizations that are offering non-critical medical aid so that the trained medical professionals can actually handle the more serious problems and not get overloaded by the influx of hospital admittances. Like, those are the groups that are actually doing something about it. But go on.
Instead, it's mainly service workers and small business owners who have been hurt, and they're not on television talking about what they're going through.
I've seen plenty of commercials and plenty of news reports talking about small business owners. Just today, I heard, I was watching that left liberal news, and two of the stories they talked about were small families and small business owners. Just saying. Just saying. Anyway, carry on.
You need to look closely to see their suffering. Over the weekend, the head of Indiana's Family and Social Services Administration announced that calls to the state's mental health and suicide prevention hotline had gone from about 1,000 to 25,000 a day. Calls to Indiana's addiction hotlines have risen dramatically as well. Reports of domestic violence have spiked in this country and, in fact, around the world. In France, they rose 32% in a single week. Someday we'll get the numbers on the child abuse going on during this lockdown, and we'll all feel sick to our stomachs. Once again, coronavirus is not the only bad thing that's happening in America right now, horrifying as it is. We should never minimize the danger of this pandemic or minimize our obligation to respond to it.
He just spent the last 10 minutes minimizing the danger and response to COVID-19 and then says we should never minimize the danger or you literally just did that for the last 10 minutes. What are you talking about? That's what you just did. That's been your whole angle. You just completely turned 180. What? What?
Wisely. We've been saying that on this show for months. No thoughtful person wants to reopen baseball stadiums tomorrow or book a cruise to Shanghai. But there has to be a more balanced course than the one we are on now. For most people, going to work cannot be more dangerous than buying produce at Safeway twice a week.
Yes, it can. Again, a bunch of people close quarters for 8 hours or half hour twice a week with distance maintained. That's one of those is a lot higher risk than the other. But keep going. We got to wrap this up.
And if it is more dangerous, tell us how it is more dangerous and be specific when you describe that.
Just did, but okay.
Otherwise, it's time to start caring about the entire population. Healthy people.
We have to care about the entire population. Screw the 2 million immunocompromised. We got to worry about the other million that are not at risk. This, the 17 million that aren't going to have a job for a couple months. They're the ones we got to worry about. Forget the 2 million that could potentially die. They could just kill over and die. We got to worry about these people without jobs. Never mind the people that are going to die. Much more important.
Are suffering badly too.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, I'm glad I got that off my chest. Sorry if that was not up to the taste and lighthearted entertainment I generally bring. But that thing's been under my skin all day, and I just had to fucking let loose on it for a little bit. So thank you for allowing me to indulge.